And welcome back. Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show with George Landreth, and I'm Rick Trader. And we are coming to you from the My Pillow Studios, the My Store studios of our very own AUN TV network. And you know, George, we love to talk about education on this show. I know with 7 children, you've had a lot of experience with education and teachers. And with that, George, please introduce our first guest of the day.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to do it because we always have the very best guests, and we've got Alex Nestor here to prove it. She's an investigative fellow for Parents Defending Education. That's, an important group, obviously. It'd be nice if we lived in a world where parents didn't have to defend education. But sadly, that's the world we live in, and I'm glad that Alex is around. But of course, before she joined Parents Defending Education, she was a reporter on education issues with the Washington Free Beacon. And she also produced podcasts for Nebulous Media. So with that, Alex, welcome back to the Conservative Commandos. We're glad to have you.
Thanks so much for having me and for your kind introduction.
I wanted to ask you, there's lots going on in our schools that are a problem. I mean, it's with all the wokeness and the craziness and all that. But what's interesting is I kind of never thought that the problem might be foreign adversaries would play a major role in our educational system, and they would have influence in our schools. It seems like, couldn't we be a little smarter than that? That maybe like friends and allies would be the only people that we would kind of allow to have a voice in our schools, but we've failed on that one. I don't mean you and I have failed. When I say we, I mean collectively, the United States has. So fill us in on what's going on here, because it seems to me that TikTok with China, that as troubling as that might be, their involvement in our education system is even more troubling.
Yeah, definitely. Just like I, say in this recent piece, we expect kids to have a sense of self-preservation in the face of fear. We should expect adults to have the same sense of self-preservation when the Chinese Communist Party comes knocking at the door. So to step back for just a second, last year, Parents Defending Education released a report that found that 143 school districts across the country had fostered ties with the Chinese Ministry of Education or the Chinese Communist Party over the course of about a decade, a little bit longer, to ostensibly provide kids in K-12 schools with Chinese language and culture programming, which sounds fantastic. And we definitely need kids studying Chinese language, studying Mandarin for sure. What we don't want is, Chinese government selected actors either acting within our schools, coming to the United States and teaching our kids, or controlling what our students are learning about China and the Chinese culture. Because I'll tell you what, they surely are not being taught about Uyghur genocide. They are surely not being taught about the Chinese enslavement of Congolese children in cobalt mines, which is used to make electric batteries. They're certainly not going to learn about the Tiananmen Square massacre, which, by the way, if you Google that in China, your screen will go blank. And they're not going to learn about Mao's Great Leap Forward, which killed tens of millions of Chinese people. So when you have the Chinese Communist Party coming in and dictating what our kids are learning, they're only going to be taught a certain narrative about China and likely a certain narrative about the United States as well. And this is something that we should absolutely be fighting, and we absolutely must disentangle the Chinese Communist Party from the American K-12 education system.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I think it's really troubling to think that we've allowed this to occur, because I'm asking myself, we've always, for example, and at least when I was in high school, the most common languages that were available as a secondary foreign language to learn in high school it was, French and Spanish and German. I'm not saying there weren't others, but those were the 3 kind of, if you will, staples of foreign language in the public schools that I was attending when I was a kid. And I'm assuming that might have been true decades earlier, a generation earlier. And so maybe, for example, kids in the 1930s could learn German as well. And that's fine. But one would hope we wouldn't have, Joseph Goebbels setting up what kids in America learn about fascism and so forth. It's one thing to learn a language, because that's an important way to communicate. And to be honest, even if you will, people who are working in the national security realm, often they need to have language skills, because part of their analysis ability is the ability to communicate and read and understand. But so I'm not, and I don't gather that you are either, suggesting we don't need to study Chinese. The question would be, if we're going to study their culture, do we really want to have totalitarians telling us what we're studying? Because I guarantee you, Joseph Goebbels would have used education as a propaganda tool, not as an education tool.
Right. And that's exactly right. We know that Confucius Institutes, which is at the university level, Confucius classrooms at the K-12 level, are a part of the CCP's global influence campaign. We know that this is part of their strategy. This is part of their long-term strategy. They want, and have openly said, they want to unseat the United States as the world's first and foremost preeminent economic and military power. And by letting them into our K-12 schools, we are just opening the door for them to come right in and be number one. And the problem there, of course, is they don't believe in freedom. They are the biggest threat to freedom, both in the United States and globally. In the United States, look, we can talk about our past. We can talk about the things that we've done wrong. We can talk about the ways that we have not always protected freedom for all Americans. We are not the Chinese Communist Party. We are a country that has done more for freedom here and abroad than any other country. Our Constitution has done more to protect liberty here and abroad than any other country's Constitution has. We are fundamentally different as a society, and that is why we need to be number one. The Chinese Communist Party cannot be number one because they will continue to do things like eliminate ethnic minorities that they find problematic within their own country. They will, control what we learn about our history. We're not the same, obviously. And it is so important that schools don't become just one more way that the Chinese Communist Party is infiltrating the United States, infiltrating our institutions, and trying to take us over as the world's preeminent power.
The media typically refers to Xi Jinping as the Chinese president. I tend to refer to him as the Chinese dictator, because
genocidal dictator. He's a genocidal dictator. Yes.
Exactly. I mean, he's a pretty evil individual. If you were to kind of create a list of evil madmen, he'd make the list, because he's not just a one-time murderer. He's murdered, if not tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of his own citizens in order to gain power and control. And I'm thinking to myself, I bet you that doesn't get covered either. In other words, when they talk about Xi Jinping, I'm sure they have all kinds of laudatory things to talk about his great inspired leadership and how he's helped China to go from being a third world country to one of the world's economic and military superpowers. And I'm sure they have lots of great things to say about him. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, you can say the same things about Hitler. Hitler took over Germany when it was a train wreck and it was in serious trouble. And he made it a world power, economically and militarily. And of course, he slaughtered millions of people in disgusting ways. And so nobody walks around going, yeah, well, look what Hitler did to help Germany. Nobody's that stupid. So the question is, should we be that stupid with Xi Jinping?
It's a very fair question. I mean, right now there's an estimated 1 million Uyghur Muslims who are in essentially camps, work camps in Xinjiang, China. That is, from what we understand, that it appears to be a genocide. He's committing genocide against these people as we speak. There was a New York Times document dump, I believe in 2019, that showed that she was key in orchestrating rounding up Uyghur Muslims and putting them in these concentration camps. And taking a step back too, again, I think we tend to obviously take our freedoms for granted in the United States, but then also put the perspectives that we have as Americans. I think we tend to think that others also think that way. I think we forget that, we live in a two-party system. China does not. If there is someone who speaks against Xi and the Chinese Communist Party in China, that person can be disappeared, that person can be punished. And that's obviously very different than what we have here. It's very frightening that we have, for example, a woman, Sarah Landy in Muscatine, Iowa, who worked with that school district to get those kids to go on one of these all expense paid trips to China, courtesy of Xi Jinping and the Chinese Ministry of Education. This woman could not admit in a CNN interview that she is a dictator. In fact, Sarah Landy said that, that's just how she can keep control of his people. He's not a dictator. He just, has to have all of the power to control his people. That's the definition of what a dictator is. That is a dictator. And it's very frightening that these people are working with our schools and teaching our children how to think about China and the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, communism, sometimes people say, oh, it's just a different way of doing things. And I would say, no, it's not just a different way. It's incompatible with our Constitution and freedom, because our Constitution guarantees us freedoms that the communist regime, actually every communist regime that's ever existed, has opposed. Everything from free speech to freedom of religion to freedom of conscience, the idea of the ability to freedom of association, all of these things that we consider to be kind of, inalienable rights, they think as they're dangerous and they must be stopped. And so anybody who says, oh yeah, communism is just I'm like, I'm sorry, if you're a communist, if you promote communism, you are basically an enemy of America and an enemy of freedom. And you are a totalitarian at heart. Am I being too harsh there, or is that fair?
That is absolutely fair. Communism, if it quote unquote hasn't been tried, hasn't been done successfully. When it's been tried, it's resulted in the deaths of tens of millions of people across the globe. In the last century alone, an estimated 100 million people were killed at the hands of communist dictators and in communist regimes. So if it quote unquote hasn't been done successfully yet, I don't think history tells us that it probably shouldn't be tried again, considering that these quote unquote attempts have killed so many people. You're not mincing, not mince words here. Communism kills people. It kills people in the tens of millions. Mao did it. Stalin did it. And it looks like Xi Jinping is taking up, Mao's torch here with the Uyghurs too.
Yeah, and with political dissidents. If you want to exit this world, like they talk about people who say they'll go attack a policeman and waving guns or start shooting him because they want to kill themselves, so they get the cops to kill them. Well, you can get Xi Jinping to kill you simply by speaking out against him. Just saying, yeah, I don't think he's doing a very good job. I'd really rather have a different leadership. Yeah, well, you'll either be in a re-education camp or dead.
Right.
But that's how it works.
Absolutely. And also, I find this push to make these connections with the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party particularly offensive to the thousands of Chinese Americans who are here because they have chosen to fled communism. And in many cases, they probably gave everything, their lives, risk their livelihood, risk their lives to get here. And just reestablishing these connections with a regime that these Americans escaped is horrifying. And it's a big slap in the face to them, too.
Absolutely. That's a great place for us to take a quick break. And I'm glad, Alex, that you can stick around because I know there's lots more to discuss. And I know Rick wants to get on this conversation as well. But folks, don't go away, because the Conservative Commandos with Rick Trader and George Landreth will be right back. And the even better news is Alex Nestor will be right back too, with Parents Defending Education. So don't go away. We'll see you on the flip side.
You're still looking good.
I'm still feeling good. You know, I've got all your MyPillow products. Mattress topper, bed sheets, MyPillows, towels, slippers, blankets, sleepwear, dog
Whoa,
bed.
whoa, Charles. Everyone now can get MyPillow products at huge discounts at MyPillow.com. That's right. Now's the time to go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of our 3-in-1 sale. We're bringing you exciting new products, overstock specials, and closeout deals you won't find anywhere else. For example, when you buy one of our brand new MyPillow 2.0s, you get another one absolutely free. And with our overstock sale, you save 50% on our luxurious Giza Dream bed sheets. That's as low as $29.99 for the best sheets ever. And with our biggest closeout special, you get our all-season slippers for only $35. Or our sandals and slides for just $25. Quantities are limited, and once they're gone, they're gone.
To order, please call 800-797-7893 and use the promotion code AUNTV. That's 800-797-7893 and AUNTV. Again, that's 800-797-7893 and AUNTV.
And welcome back. Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show with George Landreth, President and CEO of Frontiers of Freedom, and yours truly, Rick Trader, coming to you from the MyPillow studios, the My Store studios of our very own AUN network. And speaking of AUN, what's coming up after Conservative Commandos? Well, how about the Stone Zone with Roger Stone? Dinesis' podcast. Washington Watch with Tony Perkins, the Joe Massini Show, More Money with Stephen Moore, the American Political Zone, Colonel Alan West, Steadfast and Loyal. All those great shows are right after Conservative Commandos, so don't go anywhere. Alex Nestor is a guest. She's an investigative fellow for Parents Defending Education. And we're talking about the Chinese and the Chinese influence that's seeping into U.S. schools. Hey, Alex, thank you for holding through that break. We really do appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Alex, before we get back into the meat of of your article, and by the way, it's up on Washington Examiner today. Is that correct?
Yeah, Washington Examiner published last week.
Okay, cool. Before we get back into it, tell us a little bit about Parents Defending Education and what you guys do.
Yeah, so we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization working to restore America's education system. And how we do that is we expose what's going on out there. We empower parents to take action, and we really invite both parents and advocates to engage in their local education system, however that may be, whether it's running for school board, filing a public records request, or submitting a letter to the editor to their local paper. We try to just really get parents and communities involved in their education system.
Hey, Alex, I got to be honest with you. I was very impressed with your knowledge of very recent past Chinese current events in history. You really set out a litany of, as I said, recent Chinese history and current events. But, you know, I would like to know, do you have any idea what China is looking to get out of these free trips they're giving to schools?
So I think from what they've said and what they've done, their goal is pretty clear. I think this is part of a larger soft power strategy to unseat the United States as the world's preeminent power. And I think to do that, something that they have to do is make the next generation of American businessmen, leaders, politicians amenable to their political ends. And how better to do that than to embed yourself in America's K-12 education system and to offer free trips to China? I mean, doesn't that sound wonderful? How great does that sound?
I'd like to go.
I mean, you're going to risk a lot in doing that, your own, data security, data privacy. But right, it sounds fantastic. And I think, teachers, administrators, parents, it sounds great. It's also very impressive for a school to get this personal invitation from Xi Jinping, just like Muscatine, Iowa, just like Lincoln High School in Tacoma, Washington. These schools have gotten invitations from Xi to visit China, all expense paid. It sounds wonderful. But again, it's part of a long-term strategy to weaken this generation of Americans, to make them more amenable to CCP political goals, and again, more broadly, to unseat the United States as the global superpower.
Remember what Rush Limbaugh used to talk about all the time, little skulls of mush? Alex, it's not just K-12 that's being influenced by Chinese money. Harvard University got over $32 million from China and Hong Kong, which is part of China. I don't think they're just giving out this money without the least expectation of something in return. Do you?
No, absolutely not. The something in return to us may seem nebulous, may seem, not super, they're not asking for, I don't know, anything, specific more than just the broad, again, power influence over Americans, or in some cases, they are getting things in return. We know, for example, from Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology in Virginia, one of the nation's top high schools, that envoy, essentially, of Chinese officials who came to visit the school received students, student projects, student research, access to the labs at Thomas Jefferson, and then they went back to China and made a string of schools in China called the Thomas schools that are set up like one of our nation's top schools. So again, whether what they're getting is nebulous, the soft power, eventual control, unseating the United States, or it's physical, tangible research, IP, what have you, China's getting something in return. They're not just this benevolent giver of funds to support the American education system. They want something in return.
Alex, I jokingly said that, hey, send me. And I really was joking when I said that. But you said, fine, if you wanted all your personal information divulged to the Chinese. What kind of information are the Chinese getting from these K-12 kids?
It's a good question. And we don't really know the full answer. But we know from some of the research pieces and parts to that answer, which again should just show you how scary the situation is and how much more work needs to be done to exfiltrate the CCP from our schools, to get them out of our schools. One, again, we know that research is being given to the Chinese student research. We also know that because of these connections, American schools are fostering ties with schools in China, universities that are tied to the Chinese military. Lincoln High School in Washington recently reestablished a sister school type partnership with a Chinese school through one of the remaining Confucius Institutes based in Washington. That Confucius Institute in Washington was created in partnership with Sichuan University. Forgive me if I said that incorrectly. Sichuan University, which is a Chinese university connected to its nuclear arms program.
What?
That is a university that has a partnership, a Confucius Institute partnership with the United States schools.
That is absolutely incredible. Alex, as you and George were discussing, across the U.S., 143 school districts have fostered ties with the Chinese government. Have you reached out to any of these school districts and say for who, for what?
So we've reached out to state departments of education specifically because there are so many school districts, and it's a non-exhaustive list. We're not, there could be tons of other school districts that have these connections as well. But we've reached out to State Department of Education, state departments of education to inform them that this is happening, to inform them of the potential consequences, to inform them of all the unknowns that come with partnering with China. And also, after we released our tutor.com list or report that just lists school districts and state departments of education that have contracts with tutor.com, which is owned by a Chinese company based in China, informing them, hey, we know that tutor.com collects, names, IP addresses of students.
Oh my gosh.
Exposing student data again. So again, really big issue that we don't really know exactly all of the parts of what's going on. But yes, we've informed both state departments of education. We've informed them both about the Confucius classrooms as well as the tutor.com and potential data privacy issues that come with partnering with China.
Alex, we're always very sensitive of our guest time, but do you have time for one more question?
Absolutely.
What's the latest on TikTok? There are a lot of people in Washington, D.C. that would like TikTok out of the American households. It's interesting to me to see so many campaigns to save TikTok. I mean, all over TV, campaigns to save TikTok. What's the latest?
So right now it's being stalled in the Senate, unsurprisingly, and it looks like the Senate is going to try to rewrite it to include other regulations on social media, which is probably outside of my sphere of what I can specifically speak on, whether or not those are good or bad. But what I will say for the TikTok bill, one, we know that TikTok is being used in schools. Two, we know that TikTok is owned by ByteDance, which is a Chinese company, and therefore may be subject to Chinese law to turn over user data to the Chinese government whenever it asks for it. Mm-hmm. So, when students are being asked to use that in schools, plus children, nationwide, 170 million American users, their data is at risk. And three, I think it is very scary that we are stalling the progression of that bill, and sometimes in the name of quote unquote freedom and free speech. Our freedoms don't defend themselves. Our freedom, more broadly nebulous, that term freedom is not going to defend itself from the Chinese Communist Party. And it is past time for our leaders at the local, state, and federal government to do something about this, because student data, children's data is at risk.
Alex, I say it almost every day here on this show. If you love your kids, get them out of government schools. You think that's good advice?
And get them off TikTok.
Get them off TikTok. Alex Nestor, investigative fellow for Parents Defending Education. So we want to thank you so much for visiting here with us on the Conservative Commandos. But please tell our audience how they could follow you, how they could read the things that you write, how they could find out more about Parents Defending Education.
So you can find Parents Defending Education at Defending Ed. That's just defendinged.org. Our Twitter handle is the same, Defending Ed. And then personally, I'm at Alex M. Nestor, I think, on Twitter, if you want to follow me. But follow Parents Defending Education. Look at our website, because that's where all of our resources are.
Alex, again, thank you so much for joining us. Take care and God bless.
Thank you.